Good morning, good evening, welcome. My name is Robert Straw. I'm the CEO of the CEIBS Zurich campus based on the lake just outside of Zurich, Switzerland. I'm really happy to invite you today and to welcome you to today's first webinar in our new series on the future of work. In the next couple of months, we're going to be hosting 5 webinars on different topics, including diversity, culture, talent management, leadership, strategic business models, and of course the topic from today. It's all about how technology and most recently the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis influences and will influence the workplace landscape going forward. We're very happy, CEIBS organization is very happy to have SwissV, Oerlikon, Alibaba, I4CP, Boyden, and Mercer, as well as CEIBS professors like Emily David, who's with us today, to bring you a diverse and current thought leadership about these topics. Also, to discuss this with you. Today's content is about making most of generational diversity. This is one of my favorite topics within this area. It's one of my areas that I'm personally very passionate about. Some of you know that I'm working on this topic of silver transformation. I'll try not to butt in too much with the expert speakers to give my 2 cents worth. So we're doing this in partnership today with SwissV. SwissV is a leading, in fact, the leading reinsurance company in the world. They happen to be about 5 miles away from our Zurich campus, their headquarters. The topic of generational diversity is very, very important to them. I know that for a fact, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. I'd like to show you this CEIBS slide showing up, if I could. Hannah, you want to show that for a second? Great. So a little bit about CEIBS. CEIBS, if you don't know it, it's China Europe International Business School. It's a school that's been around about 27 years. Our main campus is in Shanghai. We've got 5 campuses around the globe, as you see on the bottom right, in Zurich, in Accra, Ghana, and 3 campuses in Shenzhen, Beijing, and Shanghai. We're very fortunate to be ranked number 1 by number 1 in Asia, and our MBA and our global EMBA programs have been ranked 2 times in a row as number 5 in the world. So we're quite honored to have that recognition. We fought hard for that. We'll see what the upcoming rankings do again, especially given the pandemic changes. We have many students from our MBA program who are actually here in Switzerland for our Twin Cities launch beginning next Monday, also on the call today. So welcome to you. We run programs with different organizations around the world. You see the list of our flagship programs. We have a world-class faculty of 68 full-time professors coming from 20 different countries. And we're very proud of our network of more than actually 25,000 alumni around the world. So that's a little bit about CEIBS. I'd like to welcome you today during the talk. If you've got questions, if you can go to the bottom of your screen and click your questions and type your questions into the Q&A, and we will answer those at the end of both Professor David's as well as Thomas Birwe's inputs. Professor David is going to start, gives an academic base for this, and then Thomas is going to join and talk a little bit about the practical implications for his company and his scope. So if you can use the Q&A at the bottom, I'd be very thankful. Before we start, we often start our webinars with a couple poll questions to get you in the space. The first question I'd like to know, because we're talking about generational diversity, is to which age group do you belong? So 44% of 40 to 50, we see this, okay? So we see the different generations here represented already, okay? So maybe Thomas and you, Emily, can incorporate this a little bit as we're going forward. Thank you. I'd like to go right to the second question. It's a little bit more nuanced. Does your organization have employee working models in place for all generations? About 50 people have answered. Flexible working hours for all ages, 50%. Lifelong learning opportunities, only 40. It's fairly low, actually. I'm surprised at that. Arrangements for working parents, not great, not even 25%. Home office, and now that's again been driven. I'd like to do this a year back and also a year forward to see what that looks like. It's 63%. Part-time options, good, 43%. Specific models for 55, 10%. That's actually higher than my personal experience. I recently queried 19 global firms. 1 out of 19 was beginning to work on this topic of the 19, and that firm is online with us today, SwissV, and they've really made a commitment to make a difference in this, and we'll find out why for this firm. Specific models for women in leadership, only 17. Come on, guys. This is terrible. Okay, it is what it is. Thank you for your inputs. I'd now like to, we're gonna document all this, by the way, and put these in the slides, and a follow-up mail, send this all out to you later. Professor Emily David is an assistant professor of management at CEIBS. Her current research is primarily focusing on discovering how to make workplaces more welcoming for people of all backgrounds and personality profiles in order to achieve better person-organization fit, maximizing performance, and avoiding employee burnout. Emily, welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Robert. That was a great introduction, and I will definitely use that stat a little bit later. So I'm happy. Sometimes when you do these kind of polls, it goes in the wrong direction, and then it kind of misholds your whole point. So this one actually really backs up what we know from the research. So things haven't changed too much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Welcome.
Well,
The floor is yours.
thank you so much. So I think you guys should be seeing my slides now. I just have a couple of them that I put together. And my scope today is just to kind of share with you some of the different research findings that we have in this space. And when we talk about generational or age diversity, it can be tackled from a lot of different angles. What we do, and usually whenever I teach on this topic in China, we talk a lot about how we can manage the conflicts that happen between people born in different generational eras, because sometimes they have very different preferences when it comes to work in terms of motivation and in terms of leadership styles. But today I'm not going to really touch on that, and instead I really wanted to focus on how we can support our aging workforce, so that kind of 55 plus category, because I think that just like what we saw in Robert's poll and in his other research, it's not something that gets the attention that it deserves, and is definitely an important thing for us to focus on, given the changing demographics that we see in a lot of countries around the world. So we have a lot of lower birth rates, we have healthier, longer lives that we're looking at, that's rapidly making our workforce a lot more aged, mature. There's a lot of ways you can put it. If you look here in East Asia, the infographic on the right is all about Singapore and the dramatic change and increase that they've had in 55 plus workers. In the US, and this is mirrored in the UK also on the left, you can see by 2025, we're gonna have a quarter of our people in the workplace that are 55 plus. Here in China even, the big topic when it came to generational diversity was, how do I manage these young employees? Because they were half of the workforce, there were 200 million plus employees, and a lot of the older generation just didn't know what to do with them. But we see that now with the baby bust, that generation's also getting older, and within a decade, we're gonna have up to 30% in that category. So we know that governments are doing a lot, but I think that the call to arms is on us as organizations, as researchers, to really optimize and engage these more experienced citizens, so that way they can kind of have longer and more productive work experiences. And as we saw, only 10% or only one company, and I'm so happy we have SwissV here to share some of their practical experiences of what works and what doesn't. But companies aren't taking this seriously as of yet. And they're definitely, if you look at the resources and you look at the time spent, they're for sure not spending as much on keeping their legacy employees active as they do, for example, with onboarding new employees. So what do we know from the research? One of the big obstacles in this space is, of course, ageism, or these negative stereotypes that we have about older workers. So unfortunately, despite all the wealth of experience, the skills, the leadership that they bring to our organizations, older workers often face negative stereotypes about their abilities, about their performance over time, their memory, even their ability to change or their adaptability. And somehow, even in today's really politically correct world, it's somehow become popular among young people to just say, okay, boomer, and kind of dismiss whatever an older person is saying. And you look at the popular polls, Deloitte did one recently with 10,000 people. 2/3 of people say that having an older workforce is a significant competitive disadvantage. Okay, so people have these beliefs about older workers that they're, kind of a weight on the company. But if you look at what we know from the organizational behavior research, more and more of these are just simply unfounded, or the opposite is true. You go to the psychology and the learning research, we know that it's possible to learn new skills and absorb new experiences, even past the age of 80. So this idea that an old dog can't learn new tricks is simply unfounded. We have time after time large scale studies that show that there's no performance difference between older and younger workers. And also proactive behaviors, kind of taking initiative, is also something that is not correlated with age. We also see significant advantages. You see some of them on the screen here. We know in addition to their wealth of expertise and experience, older workers have significantly less likelihood to engage in theft. They're more likely to speak up whenever there's an unethical action or shoplifting that's occurring. They're less likely to quit, and they're less likely to be absent. So there's a lot of advantages that we see with older workers, but it's really kind of a two-part lesson that we need to share with organizations. The first one is just kind of education, knowing that these stereotypes are unfounded, knowing what the true research says, and making sure that the workforce in our companies, and especially our hiring managers, are also aware of the reality. The second and kind of trickier and more important thing in a lot of respects is that we really need to make sure that we're making spaces that engage these older workers. Because it's not enough just to kind of keep them or hire them, but we really have to make sure that they're still motivated, they're still engaged, they're still excited about the work that they're doing. And so part of it, as I said, is getting rid of this myth that younger people are smarter, cheaper, more motivated, and even the myth that older workers don't get motivated by money. Because as we all know, with the recent pandemic, with the up and down economies, the reality is that sadly, a lot of people just can't afford to retire at the normal age. So this idea that they're not financially motivated can even be unfounded. So moving beyond just kind of stopping ageism or discrimination, I think we really need to make sure that our workplaces are very inclusive. And what I mean by this is that even if you don't have employees who are overtly discriminatory towards the older workforce, what we have is something we call a stereotype threat. So older workers in an organization, particularly one that's not very welcoming, that doesn't have a lot of other older workers, what happens whenever they see some kind of a cue in their environment that reminds them of their age, they kind of internalize that and then become very anxious about their performance, overthink things, think that people are judging them for the work that they're doing and for the competencies they're showing. And over time, this anxiety and this overthinking can lead to serious burnout and disengagement issues. And it could be something really innocuous. It could just be in the break room, a couple of younger employees talking about a band that they just saw, or realizing that you can't pick up the same number of boxes in the office anymore. It could be just observing the continuously new fashions and weird hairstyles and younger faces show up around the office. And so it's really important, again, that we don't just not discriminate, but that we take the extra step to engage and to make everything really inclusive. Because there's a real danger of having disengaged older employees. All right, so we know by now, anybody who's taken an OB course should know that disengaged workers of any age are pretty bad, right? By some estimates, they only bring 60 to 80% of the value that an engaged employee does. But the thing about a younger unengaged worker is that they're just going to leave. They're going to find another company. They're going to move on to somewhere that they like better. But older workers, it takes them roughly twice the amount of time to find a job as someone under 50 if they're over 50. And that's pre-pandemic. So now, the job options are even more scarce. So the odds are, if you have an unengaged older employee, they might just decide it's not worth it and stick around anyway, despite that low productivity level that I just spoke about. This is a bad news for organizations because a lot of times older workers are more expensive in current pay structures. And a lot of times, we see that they're in management positions, they have teams, and we know from the literature that disengagement and burnout are very contagious. They can go from one person to another very easily. So it can really have rippling effects in multiple ways in your organization. So it's very important that you not just try and get the warm bodies of the mature workers in there or try and retain them, but that you do the extra step to keep them engaged. And part of the kind of theme of this webinar series is, okay, well, how has this changed in the times of COVID? And it's kind of a mixed bag from my perspective. So some things is that these cues that I just spoke about that trigger stereotype threat in some ways have gotten a lot more salient. So you think about what things are. What do we hear on all the media all the time? It's that older people are more vulnerable to the virus. They have worse reactions. They need to do more about social distancing. And so all these kind of messages really, inadvertently reinforce this idea that the older population is weaker or that, they're a little bit more fragile. Other things is that now, of course, all our meetings, like we're doing now, are in Zoom format. And this can be a very powerful cue too, because number one, you have to see your own face now that you really weren't faced with at work a lot before. But not only that, you can immediately compare that face to all the other faces on the call and nothing else. So some of these stereotype threat things are a little bit more damaging, especially because we don't have as much physical contact where people can show you that they value you in other ways. But in other ways, I think it's gotten a little bit better. So generally during the pandemic, we've all gotten to a place where we're more transparent with our lives. We know more about our coworkers' problems outside of work. So I think that people are in general becoming more empathetic, more flexible when it comes to accommodating either a younger person's, lack of childcare situation, or an older worker's maybe need to have one or two other doctor appointments. And another positive thing that I've seen recently, so again, another Deloitte survey, 2020 Millennial survey. For the first time since they started taking that one, this is the first time that the younger workers actually had more loyalty for their companies. They also had more personal responsibility for contributing to their peers and to the community. But the reason why they had more loyalty was that they said that the companies were doing more to support diversity and to inclusion, to support sustainability efforts, and to upskill or reskill employees. So it seems to me, and the way I'm reading into this, is that there has been a positive trend towards these things that are generally engaging for people of all ages. And so that way that kind of bilateral relationship between organizational and employees and among employees are becoming stronger. So the last thing I want to highlight, though, of course, any of the evidence-based things we know about engagement are going to help older people, but there are some specific things that we can do to support the more mature workers and make sure that they feel valued and make sure that they stay engaged, which means that they can use all that experience, use all that knowledge that they have, and put it towards your company. But to do so, I think we really need to have, from an HR perspective, a real disruption of the way we think about career trajectories, the way we think about retirement itself. Leveraging the gig economy to really think about what are some other options and how else could this really look like. One of the big things that a lot of more mature workers look to do is something like a phased retirement or something to where they can move to a role that is more mentoring based, where they can transfer their experience, but that also has reduced stress and demands. And I think to make this work in a company context, we really need to see a kind of a separation between having the pay structure tied so much to a person and their tenure and their skills, and having kind of the pay structure and especially the bonus structure, et cetera, tied more to the job itself, the role scope, and its responsibilities. Because I think it would be fine that these aren't the highest paying roles. So we need to have people be able to transition to a place where they could still give back but have a less demanding role. And I think the way to stop this stereotype of kind of the older worker getting replaced by the younger, cheaper employee is by having some of those roles reflective of that. Other cool initiatives that I've seen, companies like Boeing and GM are doing things called returnships. So you have employees that maybe retire, it's not all they thought it was going to be, or maybe they want to switch industries completely, try something new. So they go into one of these returnships in a cohort, they get heavily trained in the industry and the company, and then some of these part-time positions actually translate into longer term ones. So this is another good way to get people re-engaged or to get people an exciting new transformation into a different industry that would also keep them engaged. Another thing that I would like to encourage is, kind of VCs or governments to really think about putting more resources towards older entrepreneurs. So we think about the aging population, and it's not just workers, it's aging people across all areas of society that are going to have very specific needs to stay healthy and comfortable. So entrepreneurial projects that are aimed at delivering medicine or at making homes more accessible or it's making them more automated. All these things are ones that older entrepreneurs could have unique insights on. And we know from the research, encouragingly, that people over 40 are like 3 times more likely to have a successful company. Those over 60 are more likely to have a company acquired or be listed on a stock exchange. So it's also a very important thing. So to close, I think it's just that we can leverage technology, and a lot of times, stereotypically, technology is seen as not the older worker's friend. But I think there are a ton of ways that we can use this also parallel trend of rising technology to help retrain workers. One idea would be to have kind of an app or website where you can pair mentors and mentees so that mentors can give the experience that they have downwards and mentees can upskill with the latest technology or the latest knowledge that they have. And finally, just looking around and really making sure that all the symbols in your environment, all the words in your values, and in your day-to-day conversations really reflect that you do care about the employee and you want to make that shown. So one way, BMW did a great job in their factories, for example, putting in more ergonomic chairs, making the benches adjustable, bigger font on the monitors. Very easy and inexpensive fixes that really communicated, hey, we're here, we want to make all these little annoying things go away so that way you can really use your experience to give back to the company. So those are just some of the thoughts and some of the stats I wanted to share with you. And I'm really excited now to turn it over to Thomas so he can tell us about some of the practical things that he's been involved in and some of the things he's seen make a real difference. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very, very much. Great as usual. I love your upbeat style. Thanks a lot. We're going to come back to some of the things, particularly what I liked was you were talking also about this, you just said it, symbols and words that are reflecting your change in mindset. So Thomas Birwe is the head of HR Switzerland at SwissV. He's heading up the HR function in the headquarter location in Switzerland, where there's about 3,500 employees. Clearly, it's a global firm, has a very large presence in Asia, as well as the US and throughout Europe. The topic of generational diversity, as I mentioned before in my introduction, and particularly the aging population is of a special importance to SwissV. We're gonna hear a little bit more from Thomas about that. And he's coming in from the organizational perspective, but there's also this personal perspective. So as you're listening to Thomas, and he's talking about the organizational perspective, also be reflecting about what Emily was kind of referring to about how are you changing your outlook in these regards regarding, for me, to millennials, and for millennials to the seniors or the silvers. It's us meeting of the minds in the middle. So there's both parts to this. Thomas, the floor is yours. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Robert. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good. So welcome everyone. So it's a great pleasure for me to be with you today and speak about a very important topic at SwissV, which is generation management. As Robert mentioned, I'm heading up the HR team in our headquarters location in Switzerland. And I was thinking of giving you two perspectives on the topic of generation management. So I will firstly speak about a little bit the macro view of how we see the market and how it impacts our organization. And second, I'd like to offer you a few of the solutions we are seeing in making our workplace more inclusive. Regarding the demographic change in the Western world, I think there's a changing face of our workforce and perception of what it means to age. So according to a recent PwC story, in Europe, the decline in working age population will be particularly relevant. And I agree to their assessment that the shortfall in workforce will require greater participation, particularly by two groups. And one group are the elderly themselves, and the second group are women. So those are the two groups which we see of particular importance in order to tackle the gap we may see as a result of the demographic change. So the good news on the topic is people are living longer and they are living healthier, and the health span overall is increasing over the times. So if you look, for instance, in Switzerland, a newborn child, a boy these days in 2020 has a life expectation of 82 years, and a girl would have 86 years of life expectation. So by 2050, this number will go up, right? And we will see a projection of 87-year-old for a boy who is born in 2050 and even 90 years for a girl. And the 100+ year life is no longer an illusion, and it might be around the corner. And we also need to see that the population of elderly increases, so goes also as a group of potential customers for many of our organizations. In the workforce themselves, more and more people want to keep working past traditional retirement ages because they want to continue contributing to society and find meaning for their own lives and what work does for them. And there's a recent study from the Swiss Insurance Association which confirms that from the working population in Switzerland, 50% would consider to retire later if there is an opportunity for a phased reduction of working percentages. And we also need about financing the potential 100+ year life and preparing for long-term financial resilience. And all of this is having a significant disruptive influence on the workforce. The fourth generation workforce is an emerging reality. And in order to maintain the economic growth, how can we as an employer recognize the productive opportunity of older workers while negative stereotypes and misperceptions persist? So we have heard about Emily's statements. So we also see those stereotypes, and we probably have all heard them. I mean, things such as it's more difficult to get along with the older generation, untrainable, unable to use technology, and tend to be more resistant to change. But actually, the general sense is that we need to recognize much, much stronger how older workers have contributed to the organization in the past, but also for their forward-looking thinking. They bring a vast majority of capabilities to the workplace. We see also that there's significant knowledge of market and customers. Social maturity and stabilities are also speaking to the advantage of the older population. And in general, I also see a clear willingness to pass on critical knowledge or business relationship to younger generation. So the question for us was really, how can we challenge the notion of oldness? And how can we help 50+ employees to prolong their working life and guaranteeing the freedom to work? How do we change the mindset and change the conversation about growing older? Because one thing is important, we won't change the demographic trends we are seeing, but we can change how we respond to the demographic changes. So let me quickly turn to SwissV and why we have laid out from an HR, from a people point of view, the topic of generation management as our top priority. So as Robert was saying, we are employing around 3,500 employees in our location. And over the next 10 years, 1/3 of our employees will leave the company due to normal and regular retirements. And this puts a significant risk for us as an organization. We are a knowledge organization in terms of losing extensive knowledge. The average tenure of SwissV employees in Switzerland is around 10 years, which is high. And we are really proud of that number because it shows how loyal the people are with us. And the people grow through the ranks, through the years, and they develop with us for different generations, basically. And now we have 4 generations working side by side. So what are our practical solutions for that? A few of them we have started already, a few are in the pipeline. So let me speak about 4 of those initiatives. Thank you for sharing that slide. Yes. So 1 year ago, we have established a dedicated project, which we call Generations at SwissV. And our vision is really to devise a framework that allows us to nurture the best each of our 4 generations have to offer. And we want to ensure, and that's a big, big objective, that the generation coexist, that they collaborate, learn from each other, and create value for our clients and our organization. And Generation at SwissV is a holistic approach to generation management. So it goes beyond motivational speeches, team building exercise, or issuing flyers and good messaging. For us, Generation at SwissV is really has a mandate to investigate our retention policies. We have in the location in Switzerland, looking at budget tolerance, the pension fund needs, at training opportunities, benefits, but we also look actively outside our own sector to learn from other organizations and get workforce analytics work so that we can early on see trends and efficiency, which we then can swiftly address or escalate to the right decision-making bodies. So on the slide, you see 4 very concrete examples on how we aim to tackle the topic of generation management. And just to say up front, this is not limited to the 4 boxes. So I think there are many, many more aspects which come into play. So the first one is really about a global concept, what we have implemented in SwissV globally, which is called our leadership from every seat concept. So basically this concept is empowering everyone to deliver their best every day and demonstrate leadership irrespective of titling or hierarchy. So both the individual employee and the employer have a shared responsibility, speaking now about generation management, to define effective measures and solutions in order to be well equipped in our changing environment. So on the employee side, from my point of view, we have the employees have the responsibility to keep their skills up to date, and this does not stop with age. And likewise, the employer has the responsibility to provide opportunities for older workers to remain on the job, to learn and to grow, and not to limit recruiting activities to younger workers, and to implement policies as well as procedures that are fair and address the needs of all generations, regardless of age. The second topic, and I'm happy that we have seen that solution in the beginning as well, with the second question Robert was asking, is about the notion of lifelong learning and feedback. And we have implemented last year a tool which we call Learning One. It's a state-of-the-art digital learning platform. So it basically enables all of our employees to learn whatever they like to learn, whenever they like to learn, wherever they like to learn, and you can use it basically on any mobile device. And it's very important that we have also conversation and feedback implemented. So there is an additional app we have implemented, which is a digital tool for enabling instant feedback, which we call My Feedback app. So we have put some of our ideas, which we have done in the past, possibly via paper or through traditional classroom training, we have digitalized those tools. And regular conversation between employees and line manager, absolutely crucial. So if you want to quote me on one point, and if you want to remember one thing, then it's around that this open dialogue between employee and line manager is so important. In particular, to discuss what are the plans for the future, from the employee, but also from the employer perspective. And we like to break through this partially perceived taboo, what we are seeing, of having open career conversation above 50. And it's encouraging to see that we have a few examples already where we see that people leaders giving back responsibilities, accepting or wanting a downgrade to reshape their career, or we have older employees also going on job rotation and learn new skills and broaden their knowledge. The third point, the third bucket here is really about the notion of flexibility. And for us, it's really important that we offer additional flexible working options for our employees. We do it, so I'm speaking here locally for Switzerland, but we obviously have also broader concepts which are applicable for SwissV globally. For me, the keyword here is about optionalities. So we like to provide our line managers as well as employees options for part-time working, for contractual arrangements, for career breaks, but even for contractual arrangements after the retirement point, right? And therefore, we really like to have a broad menu of opportunities which fits each and every individual. So this year we have introduced a new concept which we call the Flex Day. So Flex Day is a very simple process which actually enables our people to buy additional vacation days through a very simple and straightforward process. And in 2021, then coming again back to Robert's second question he was asking, in 2021 we will experiment with a new flexible working option which we call Flex Plus, which allows specifically employees at the age of 58 or above to reduce their working degree gradually and to step back from full-time responsibilities. And with this solution, we are aiming to retain our older and highly skilled employees longer in our workforce. And last but not least, it's really about building an inclusive workplace. And I like to say a word also about the younger generation. So it's so important that you have the right skills in the pipelines as well. I mean, we are offering graduate programs, internship program, apprentice programs. So there are different ways of entering our organization. And we also need to prepare ourselves for the new generations and what they need and what their aspirations are. So we see that some of the values are different, some are similar. But for instance, we see that there's a lot of interest in human connection, security, but also in personal growth when speaking about the younger generation. And we like to foster this constant dialogue across all the different generations to maintain an inclusive workplace. Next to that, we also focusing on topics such as reconciling our parenthood, paternity leave is a topic, and newly we will also look after childcare opportunities. And job sharing and further optionalities for our people. But I guess digging deeper into that topic would require an additional webinar. So therefore, at this time, I'd like to hand back to you, Robert.
Thomas, thank you so much. There's so much depth behind that one slide. I'm seeing and imagining all of the very, very detailed processes that go to support that in an organization like yours. So, and to get all those, that ecosystem around that is very, very challenging to build that up. And the devil is definitely in the details. It's easy to give an overview, but the real is at the execution. What do you tell the people? How do you manage them? How do you consult them? How do you actually build these models? It's not so easy, as we know, right? It takes years and years to really have a robust system. And we know that it's also changing, So thank you very much for that overview. We've got a bunch of questions coming in from different sides. I'm going to ask you a provocative question, Thomas. So
please.
Why now? We saw this. You should have seen this. I could blame you to say, Thomas, you're the head of HR. You should have seen this 5 years ago coming. Why didn't you do something 5 years ago?
So my simple answer would be, I just joined 2 years ago.
Yeah, but
so that would be a very simple answer to the question. No, but I mean, you're right in that sense, right? I mean, if you look into the workforce analytics, all the metrics we are having, I mean, that's something you can quite accurately plan for, right? And I mean, you can quite accurately plan for how our workforce would look like in 10 years from now. I think it was always a topic, so also before my time with SwissV, but I think it was things like, for instance, I mentioned briefly this contractor model, right, where you can return to SwissV, on a contractor basis post your retirement. I think that's a that's a policy which is around for years, if not decades, right? But the devil is really in the detail of really having those conversations between the line manager and employees. And therefore, I mentioned it as part of my short speech, that this is the real enabling element, which is so important, that the line manager and the employee develop a trusted relationship to each other, that the employee is sharing about their plans for the future, but also that the employer is sharing how the position may change due to digitalization, as an example. Right? Many of the jobs we are seeing right now will look differently in 10 to 20 years' time. And that dialogue needs to happen. And that's so important. So therefore, you're absolutely right that that's the devil in the detail.
So I'd like to take this to a more global perspective. The demographics we know in China, we know in Vietnam, we know in the US, we know in Germany. We've known all of this, not just at the organizational level, but globally, we know that this problem, Emily, you mentioned it very early, you know, in 2050, we're going to have 2 billion people on this earth that are over 60, right? And sure, there's a whole other opportunity there from consumption and technology and healthcare and things like that, but we've got a big issue. So I'm going to ask a little bit of an even bigger philosophical question. Why do we have retirement at all?
Well, I'll take the first stab at that one. So that was kind of something whenever Thomas was answering your first question, I think that might have been part of the issue also, is just, you know, kind of attitudes about retirement. And it was just always so celebrated as, you know, okay, now you can go do this and, you know, enjoy your life. And, but I think that more and more people are taking more of a seize the day kind of attitude now, and they've seen so many of their colleagues that maybe never got to enjoy anything, or you know, with the longer lives. I thought that was a really great point Thomas made earlier. We have to finance much longer lives and you know, potential future pandemics and whatever life is going to bring our way. So I think that the concept of retirement it's lost its luster for sure, and I think a lot of, you know, governments and people are kind of coming into it. But I think the healthy way would bring it more to a personal choice, you know, and something that different people kind of want to do it. But if you look at academia, for example, we've had that same model forever. There's so many professors that just keep going, you know, until that's it. So I think it's a matter, since we've gotten better about engaging employees, making work meaningful, actually doing work that's not, you don't have to suffer through it to get to the good part of life. I think that we're going to see more and more people that kind of want to hang on to it.
I think too, you mentioned the study from Deloitte about millennials and things, and part of that is also about millennials stepping up their ability to be more committed and bringing in, and it has to do with also the firms matching this to say we're having more purpose-focused work. It's also about that, as purpose and profit and progress becomes more and more prevalent, those topics. So the firms are working on it, and the employees as well, right?
Right. Yeah, so I think as we see more merging into that, then we might see some of the retirement kind of issue just kind of go away, because people are getting so much of their life's fulfillment from the work that they're doing.
Right. Thomas, any thoughts from you about retirement?
So as an organization, we have a very strong purpose, right? I mean, our purpose is we want to make the world more resilient, right? So I think that's very strong purpose, and many of our people can identify with that purpose. And I think we embarked also, you know, in our regional HR team on the journey of developing purpose in our day-to-day jobs and sharing that purpose, why we go out of bed every day. And while there was possibly initially a little bit of resistance of speaking about it, it has been proven to be very powerful. And we see it also in that this spreads out to other parts of SwissV, that we speak more about what really drives us, what motivates us. It's not just, you know, it's not just about the financial aspects of working longer. It's also about meaningful work and doing something good for the organization and society in general.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to switch it back a little bit to a different tone, and not quite so philosophical. There's a question, I'll read it to both of you. Sometimes I feel like there's a gray area between facts and stereotypes. For example, we know generally older people suffer more on average with COVID-19 than younger people. how can I manage this in my work conversations so that I don't make people feel bad?
I have a couple of thoughts on this one. So it's something I teach a lot of classes on diversity. It's one of my research passions also. And so when you talk about diversity, usually this comes up, especially if I'm talking about stereotype threat and these little cues or these little things that can make people feel bad about themselves. I don't think that the answer is to pretend that differences don't exist at all. That's the wrong thing, is just to ignore it. If you think about older workers in particular, if you just pretend that they're exactly the same as younger workers, then you'll have a 65-year-old out trying to lift and keep up physically with people who are 25, when you could use their expertise in a much more productive way that's going to keep them engaged longer. So I don't think ignoring it is kind of the way to go. But you can just be a little bit more open in your language. And so by that, I mean, don't say all millennials love working from home. You might say, in our company, it seems that on average, millennials prefer to come work to home. You know what I mean? And put the statistics out there. Because it's a small change and it seems just like semantics. But to me, I think that it's really, as you guys keep saying, the devil's in the details, and people read into the things you say and how you say them. And by putting something like that, then it really kind of signals, okay, I'm not a black and white thinker. I'm open to considering new evidence, and I'm open to, changing my mind if something else kind of came up, or if I see someone who happens to be an outlier in a group who doesn't fit that average, for example. So I think those are some of my thoughts about, how we can deal with actual differences versus stereotypes. Thomas, did you have anything to add?
Yes. So I think for me, it's important that we don't have, I mean, yes, we have the generational workforce, but first and foremost, we have 3,500 employees in the location and 3,500 individuals. And what we're trying to do is really to try to understand the needs of the various generations. But when we shift gear and go into the solution mode, we try to implement solutions which are valid and helpful for all generations. Right? So I think that's actually our ambition. We have at times, obviously, a bit of emphasis, at times a little bit more in the generation of the younger generation. Right now, we have a little bit more focus on the older generation, and we shouldn't forget about the generation which is in the middle, right? Because it's also a risk, right? So that you focus on either side. So we really like to think of all generation inclusively at the and many of the solutions I've offered to you. I mean, in terms of the 4 solutions, I mean, nearly all of them, with the one exception of this 58+ option, we see all are valid for everyone. So everyone is asked for lifelong learning. Everyone is asked to have career conversation. Everyone is, asked to think about flexible working arrangements, right? So it's therefore we try to not giving too many benefits to one or the other generation, but rather make it valid for all.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate again. So it's known in the business that insurance firms have fantastic pension funds, especially in the German-speaking region. When you go to work there, in fact, firms like yours have said for years, you can retire at 58. In fact, we encourage you to, and because our system, we paid you very, very well over the years, and we've put a huge amount as a commitment from the firm into the pension fund. How are you changing this to disincentivize people? In other words, let me rephrase that in a positive sense. How do you really, what models are you offering to really keep people to stay when they have financially perhaps the freedom to leave?
So I think there's a change in the workforce. So it's not just about financial aspects.
Absolutely.
Right? I think there is a lot about, in particular in a purposeful organization like ours, there's a lot about doing something good and doing something meaningful for the organization. And I mean, yes, we see, and that's a challenge. I mean, we see that many of our employees retire before the regular retirement age, which is 65, right? So we see not many people go until that final day or even beyond, right? And we need to change that, right? And I think the demographic change, which I quoted earlier, I mean, it's hitting us now, right? We see it, we feel it, we see it in the number of applications, particularly for very specialized role. There's something still where I'm thinking a lot what's really the reason for it, because we see quite a limited number of applications also from elder generations. So we haven't figured out why this is the case. I mean, it could be tons of reasons, but we really need to do everything we can to keep our employees longer in the workforce. And if there's one KPI out of our initiatives, then it's really about pushing out the retirement age.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I won't go into the politics of that in most countries trying to move to that direction. We just have a few more minutes in this on the webinar. I'm conscious of the time, and I want to ask one question here that came up during the Q&A from Gianluca. What is the role that regulators can play to facilitate the inclusion of older employees, based on your model, Thomas, as an example?
Obviously, I think we have started to do so, to speak with regulators about what we see, what our need is in the organization. I mean, the pension system in Switzerland, I mean that's my primary remit. It's focused on the pension fund which is owned by the employer, right? So it's less so about the government relationship. So it's more in that respect. But I mean, it's a constant dialogue, right? In terms of, and that we also have the incentives, right, to work longer, and that we not disincentivize basically that people go into early retirement, but really consider also this, what I said earlier, the 100+ year life, right? I mean, this will come at one point in time, and that we consider those elements also from a regulator point of view. And I think a big topic which is very untapped is financing all of the pension which we need to pay. I mean, I mentioned earlier, right? We have right now four people in the workforce, and we have one retiree, and that will turn, right? I mean, this will a different relationship in the future. So we need to have innovative models. But I mean, as you said earlier, right? I mean, we have we need to have this dialogue. I mean, we are quite it's the beginning of that project, right? Not everything of what we have done here is yet implemented, so it's in the pipeline. And we need to see how our people will react to it, and maybe we need to adjust as well, and then we need to speak to the regulator. So it's not a one-time communication. It's a constant dialogue we need to have.
Yeah. Last question I'd like to ask is about it's also a global type of question, because in a lot of regions, seniority means you're the boss. The guy who's the oldest, the woman who's the oldest is naturally the boss in many countries, regardless of whether they should be or not. So we have very hierarchical systems in place. So the question is, I'm a younger manager and I have an older employee. What's the best way to handle this somewhat awkward situation and keep my employee engaged? We know socially, culturally, this can be, you're a global firm, and Emily, you're doing research on this. What's the best way to tackle this? If you know, we've got, like I said, we've got a bunch of MBA students on the line as well, and this is going to be them really in just a couple of years when they get back to work. Maybe you can take a stab at that, Emily.
Yeah, sure. I think it's when you think about differences in kind of a supervisee relationship, a lot of them come down to the same effort. So anytime there's a difference, we have to put a lot more effort on the front end to establish trust, to build that relationship. But I think in this particular situation, you'd really want to do a lot more to show respect, in terms of you respect how much experience they have, the characteristics and the skills that they're bringing to the table. And I think that really kind of signaling that and really showing that a lot of the things that, like Thomas mentioned, the two-way dialogue, keeping open communication, making it very clear that you want it to be a two-way learning relationship. I think that those kind of things are important. It couldn't hurt just to do a little bit of research on what are some of the generational preferences. So I'm not sure exactly what the different age group is, but for a lot of older workers, for example, they prefer different kinds of feedback. So in the younger generation, we want very quick feedback all the time, you know, to slowly and incrementally go, whereas some older workers might really value less frequent but more concise, very high quality feedback. So they don't want to feel like they're being lectured to, for example. So I think having a couple of these different nuances, you know, kind of finding common ground on values that they might care about, like hard work or loyalty. These kind of things can be a way that you can really build that relationship early on, so that way you can get over that aspect of, you know, does this kid deserve to be there, you know, etc. So those would be some tips that I would have.
Thank you. Thomas, any follow-up comments from you?
I mean, it goes in the same direction, right? I mean, I think it's really about caring about, as a people manager, caring about your employees, trying to understand the motivation, speaking the language, showing also respect to them. Again, this is actually something which is valid for all types of generation, not just for the older ones, but I think it's more really applying this good leadership principles, I would say. Comment to a second angle we are trying to do in several parts of our organization, because we do have a hierarchy structure, right? Like many other organizations as well. We are modeling and experimenting many parts of our business with agile methodologies, which breaks through this traditional line manager employee relationship, right? So you have less talk about the different levels, management level you are having. And I think that has an impact, because these factors go a little bit more into the background, and it's then really more on the human connection, the adult to adult conversation, which we are seeing through these models.
Right. Well, thank you all very much for your questions. To the speakers, Emily and Thomas, thank you so much for your insights. It's a sampling. It's a sprinkling of a few ideas around this. We could talk for hours and hours on these topics. So thanks to you both. We might come back to you a couple more questions that we weren't able to answer in the Q&A, but out of time reasons, we're going to cut it off because I've got to actually join another webinar in 2 minutes. But we'd like to follow this up with a mail with some post-webinar materials. We'll send out the things from Emily as well, including a link to the next series, the webinar in the series called Reinventing the Talent Ecosystem, where our partner Earlycon and Alibaba will be joining us. So thank you again to all of you, the speakers, as well as the participants. Thanks so much for attending. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.